The global financial crisis of 2007-8 resulted in widespread unanimity among regulators, policymakers, and researchers of the financial world. At that time, India was still under significant state regulation and witnessed a persistent demand for further deregulation and the need for sustained higher growth rate.
To address this inadequacy, the nation realized the need for an integrated financial architecture. All the financial sectors, banking, non-banking, insurance, investment, had to come together to lay the foundation for the economic development of India.
To provide insights on the topic, financial architecture and economic development of India, we are honored to have with us Dr. Subramanian Swamy, sir, former member of Parliament of the Rajya Sabha. Also, adding glory to the days are C.A. Vishal Doshi, Central Council Member, ICI, C.A. Rikin Patel, Chairperson, Vikasa, Vadodara, C.A. Manoj Sahu, Chairperson, Vikasa, Vadodara, Mr. Arpan Shah, Vice Chairperson, Vikasa, Vadodara, and Mr. Harsh Vekaria, Treasurer, Vikasa, Vadodara. Also, of the days, we recognize the presence of Mr. Jagdish Shetty, National General Secretary, Virat Hindustan Sangam, and Mr. Vijay Sharma, Advocate, Gujarat High Court.
We would now request C.A. Manoj Sahu to please give his opening remarks.
Good afternoon. The topic of this session, that is financial architecture and the economic development of India, is very less unheard, I say. For any country, financial architecture and the economic development is a key for the due governance and making the policy in the countries. Post-COVID, lots of changes have been made in the policies. But to jump back our economy to original positions, as a professional, we have to strive hard. And as a human being, we need to put best practices in place. So let's this session start with the goal to make the India more developing with a great pace. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Subramanian Swamy, sir, is a teacher, educationist, and an economist by profession. He holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics and also a master's degree in statistics from the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. He was recommended for a full Rockefeller scholarship at Harvard University, where he received his PhD in economics. He has also worked at the United Nations Secretariat. He has served as the member of the Rajya Sabha. He has also served as the member of the Planning Commission of India and as the Union Cabinet Minister for the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, with additional charge of Ministry of Law and Justice. He is considered as one of the most prominent voices in Indian foreign policy and diplomatic relations. He has a number of books, journals, and research papers to his credit. We are honored to have you with us, sir.
Welcoming the guest with a special gesture is the tradition of our culture. I would now request C.A. Manoj Sahu and C.A. Rikin Patel to welcome Dr. Subramanian Swamy, sir, with a memento and plantable seed pens.
I now request Mr. Harsh Vikaria to welcome Mr. Jagdish Shetty, National General Secretary, Virat Hindustan Sangam, with a memento and plantable seed pens. We request you to come up on stage. Thank you, sir.
May I now request Mr. Arpan Shah to welcome Mr. Vijay Sharma, Advocate, Gujarat High Court, with a memento and plantable seed pens. Thank you, sir. I would now request Dr. Subramanian Swamy, sir, to please address the gathering.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I was in a terrible squeeze in terms of program. I had a court case on the 7th. I had a court case which is the National Herald case on tomorrow. And I had to fit you in. So originally I was reluctant to accept your invitation, knowing how important it is and the young students whom I could address. But then when I saw the topic, I was impressed because I know the topic, but I don't think many people in India know the topic. It's an extremely important topic because it says financial architecture on one side, which is a new concept. You will find most people don't even know. If you go to the Finance Ministry of India, nobody will know it. That much I know. And the other thing is the economic development. So these two have been brought together. Why is it important to bring it together? I hardly need to tell you about the financial architecture because you know it very well. I mean, institutional regulations of the Securities Exchange Commission, the international standards of accounting for transparency and transaction, corporate governance, sound banking, prudential norms. These are all parts of the financial architecture. But this concept of financial architecture integrated with economic growth is perhaps the most exciting topic in the theory of development. And I have written about it, I have published books on it, and at Harvard I've taught this as a special course in the economics department. Now, I've already explained to you what the financial architecture is. It's a structure, and the structures all are familiar to you separately. Economic development includes economic growth. Economic growth means growth in GDP. Then per capita growth in GDP. That is different from GDP growth you can have 7%, 6%, 8%. But to have to know the level of prosperity, you need per capita GDP. Then you have the concept of inflation. No country should have a long-term inflation more than 5% growth. And that's another requirement. The foreign exchange reserves, at least 10 months imports should be available as a foreign exchange in your kitty. and so on. I mean, there are many others. Declining inequality is another concept for economic development. Unemployment should not be more than 3%, 2%, like that. So these are all details which I don't need to go into. What I am going to address is that why is it important to have knowledge of financial architecture? And that's where the first crucial part is, which you need to know, that there have been nations which have grown very fast and became developed countries. There have been nations who grew very fast and then collapsed. So, what is the difference between the two? United States and Europe are economies which grew and then remained as developed countries. Latin America, Argentina, Chile, all these countries, they originally grew very substantially. In fact, ahead of America at that stage. And then they began to collapse. And they've never recovered. Then there's a 1997 example of Japan, South Korea, etc. These East Asian nations, as they are called. They also grew very fast. In fact, Japan had overtaken America. They had gone, Japanese businessmen had gone to New York and bought Rockefeller Center, which upset the Americans a lot. And then suddenly, the whole thing collapsed from 1997 to 2000. And Japan has still not recovered. It's now a prosperous country, but it's not a leading economy because of what happened to them. So in all these cases, what is the factor which is important is that the financial architecture did not exist along with the economic growth or economic development. United States went on making changes in its financial architecture. So financial architecture became the minimum necessary condition for economic growth. You can have economic growth, but if it is not backed by the financial requirements, the financial architecture, then you will have a crash. And you will not be, will find it very difficult to recover. We are in that situation today. We are not collapsed, but we don't have a financial architecture properly defined. They keep getting amended today. Today there will be an announcement from the Reserve Bank, then there will be an announcement from the Finance Ministry. This will go on. But a structuring of what is called as architecture, we still don't have it, and we need to build it. And I would advise all of you who are interested, research-minded, please, this is an area which you should work on to see what should be the financial architecture for India's economic development. Of course, you'll have to first lay down what you need to do to economic development. Now, economic development, my opinion is, and I said this from day one, when it was not acceptable. I say that when Jawaharlal Nehru took over as Prime Minister and brought in 5-year plans, growth rate from 1950 to 1990, the average growth rate per year was just 3.5% per year. Just 3.5% per year. So was China's, only 3.5% per year. But then China branched out into a different thing, a different route, with the help of the Americans. But I won't go into that because it's a very big topic, and I have limited time, which I have to finish my talk to you. So therefore, the question is that what is the growth rate target you should adopt for a country like India? I would say you should not grow now less than 10% per year. And that 10% per year is achievable. I can tell you how it can be achieved. But then what you need to achieve it is what comes where the financial architecture question comes. If we want to grow at 10% per year, I'll give you some numbers. Then if your rate of investment for the country, rate of investment, that means includes rate of savings, which is of households, and of course corporate savings, etc., etc. The rate of investment must be 36% at least of the GDP. And if your use of capital efficiently, then with this 36% you can achieve a 10% growth rate, provided the incremental capital output ratio. I don't know whether you have seen this concept, but if you're not, you please go and check the dictionary and find out. Incremental capital output ratio, I'll put it in simple terms, is the extra capital you need to grow at one rupee more. And in ratio terms, you get numbers like 3, 6. Japan for many years had 2.5. Then now, of course, it's more like 4. India has had a very bad incremental capital output ratio, and it has been very inefficient, and the inefficiency is largely due to the large corruption in the country. It's also due to too much state, which was there during Jawaharlal Nehru's period and Indira Gandhi's period, and to some extent Narasimha Rao's tenure, in which I was also a minister. I had a minister's rank position, that is, and that changed for the first time. Our consistent 3.5% per year growth rate from 1950 to 1990, it was converted slowly, step by step, and within 5 years, we were growing at 8% per year. Growing at 10% is not difficult now for us, but then the way to do it numerologically is to see how much have you got the rate of savings, rate of investment you need. Yes, 36%. It is today 36%. It was rather just before the corona, it was 36%. Still not climbed back. I'm sure it will climb back soon enough. But you must incentivize the people. You must support them in their investment. You must support them in their savings. You can't be hostile to them. I'm sorry to say the present climate sometimes appears as if they're hostile to people who are builders. The corporate sector, for example, is constantly complaining to me at private conversation. I don't think they can publicly complain. They'll get into trouble, I'm sure. But the fact is that they do complain. There are so many restrictions. GST. GST, of course, I'm totally against it, because instead of simplifying it, complicates it. So, therefore, what I'm saying is that you must ensure that your growth rate grows fast. That can only be done if your incremental capital output ratio is not more than 3.6. So 36 divided by 3.6 give you 10% growth rate. That's the way to mention it. There are some numbers which get floated around, but when you go deeper into it, you know that's not possible. For instance, the Prime Minister announced that he is going to get $5 trillion in 5 years. The time he said it, it was only 2.5 trillion. So that means he wanted to double the GDP in 5 years. Very laudable, but what is the implication? The required growth rate of going from 2.5 to 5 in 5 years requires, the growth rate required is 14.8% per year. That is something we have never achieved so far, and very few countries, in fact, can claim that they have achieved such a growth rate on a consistent basis. So, therefore, I don't know who, it's not the fault of the Prime Minister, because he's not supposed to know every subject, but somebody did misinform him, And he said it, and finally I had to write him a letter. And I think he has, I don't think he has been saying that anymore. But the fact is, these are not impossible targets, but they require what we say, the efficiency in the use of capital, the productivity of the labor, innovations which take you see, normally what happens is, if you have elementary economics, you've got labor on one axis and capital on another axis, and you have a production curve which goes up and then starts bending. But if you've got innovation, then that production curve starts moving up itself. Because for every extra 1 rupee of capital or extra 1 hour of work of labor, you get a higher productivity due to the new innovations. Instead of going by bullock carts, you start by going by cars. Of course, it makes a very big difference. So, innovation is an extremely important part in terms of the productivity. So, that is one aspect. Second is structural changes. Agriculture, when we started off, was 75% of our agriculture, of our GDP was being produced in agriculture. Now it is down to a much less, it's less than 30. So agriculture is a sector which of course has to be nourished because the food has to come, but it's the rate, the returns you get from the investment is much lower than in the industrial sector and the service sector. So the industrial sector and service sector should be given special focus. That's another aspect. So all told and everything put together, what we have got today, what we have today is this, that India has enormous potential. Don't listen to all these depressing people who give you that India is a land of poor and so on. India was once upon a time the most developed country in the world. And it remained a developed country till 1700. It's only after foreigners came, looted this country, and then after one wave, the British came, they looted it more scientifically. So ultimately we lost about 71 trillion rupees to the British. And I suppose we should ask for British to give it back, but then there will be no Britain after that. So, how do you therefore plan this? First, you must get your financial architecture right. We don't have our financial architecture right. And I'm glad you chose this subject. Many of you should write a thesis on it. What are I've given you 4 dimensions of financial structure. But what financial structure does India need today for it to grow fast? That these two are connected. Why? As I told you, Britain, the Americans, the Europeans, they grew and became developed country and remained developed country. Latin America went up and down. Japan, Korea, etc. went up and then down. So why did they go? Because they didn't have a financial architecture. So the financial architecture is the necessary condition, the minimum necessary condition for growth. And then, of course, you can think of economic development by adding all these global aspects. You have to, as I read out earlier on, there are so many aspects of economic development. Right now I'm concentrating, telling you economic growth, the rise in the rate of growth of GDP. That is crucial. And if we today grow at 10% per year from some years, say next year for another 10 years, which is easy, then we will overtake China. If we grow for another 25 years at 10% per year, we will overtake America. So don't put anything beyond your capacity or your past history. But it is a question of being able to understand what the ramifications are and what you have to concentrate. So since you've chosen this topic, I hope you'll pursue it. You will write papers on it, and you will discuss it in amongst your own seminars. But ultimately, if you want to talk about the economic development of India, it cannot be spoken of without the help of financial architecture. And once you got the architecture right, then it will be permanent. There will be no turning around. There will be no Japan for you. There will be no Latin America for you. It will be what the Western countries got. So this is what I want to say. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir, for gracing this session with your knowledge.
I now invite.
So, sir has like 5 minutes time. Couple of quick questions related to the topic. So, yes, sir. Sending the mic.
Yes, sir.
Sir, you rightly said that developed countries like US has remained developed. But don't you think that the contribution of US dollar, which is gifted as a dominating country and accepted worldwide, has also played an important role?
I don't know what you mean by gifted. That is something of their achievement. They have managed their international monetary system very carefully. And they have a Security and Exchange Commission which is very strict in their stock markets. And they have done what any able country should be able to do. And that is, we ourselves, in 1949, the rupee to dollar rate was 1-to-1. In 1977, it was 7-to-1. 7 rupees to $1. Why are we today 80? On what basis? You see, there is no demand supply here. Why is it that you have to pay 80 rupees for $1? And that is because you have not structured your foreign currency arrangements. You haven't built enough of your reserves. You have to have, as I said, in at least 10 months of imports in your reserves. So, and then over a period of time, the Americans were able to make it as a convertible currency. Nobody else has so far succeeded. The Chinese now, they've missed the bus. I don't think that the Chinese system, the Chinese system, let me tell you what its weakness is. In 1971, they made friends with America. And America was very keen to develop China so that it becomes a counter to USSR. Of course, USSR collapsed. Today we have only a small part of USSR which is called Russia. So the American calculation that China will be a long-term opponent of the USSR disappeared. And China, by the meantime, they were allowed to import semi-processed goods from Japan, Taiwan, and that of all the countries, Taiwan, Americans allowed that, South Korea, so on. And what they would do is take that to China, use their cheap labor, and add value to it, and then export it to the West. For example, take a Lenovo computer laptop. They will send you with the circuits and so on. it comes to China, Chinese labor will put the keyboard, the glass case and the cover, and then put a stamp made in China, Lenovo, in China at all. It's made in Taiwan, but they will put it as made in China and export it to all the other parts of the world. So they are getting money by getting the raw material, the semi-processed goods from the East Asians at a cheap rate, use their cheap labor, which is sometimes almost forcible, and then export it for a much higher price to the West. So this gap, they made all their money. Today, that's evaporating. The Americans are also getting restive. The Americans are looking for alternatives where we have still not prepared ourselves to see that how we can fit into the American desire to be a challenge economically to China, because we are also thinking that we should not befriend China, we should also be friends with Russia. You can't be friends with everybody, by the way. I don't know why Jawaharlal Nehru onwards, we have always been succumbing to this. So to cut it short, what I'm saying today is that all these things can be done if you get both your financial architecture and your basic equations of economic growth right. And that's all that needs to be done. Last question. You can call me again after some time. Oh. Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Do you think that the American policy of issuing currency by not backing the gold is a bubble kind of thing which will splash the economy and the whole world like 2008?
Yes, I understand you. Is your question over?
Yes, yes.
Why you need gold backing? I mean, do we have gold backing for Indian rupees? These are all based on confidence. And I think if the Americans unduly produce currency out of proportion to their production, they themselves will suffer. I think you should allow the market forces to take care of this. And I am certainly totally against this gold standard in any form. And because it's out of date, what we need is confidence. If a dollar says that it'll give you these are the goods you will get for $1 in America, then you can convert that to see whether those goods can be obtained for 1 rupee, 7 rupees, 50 rupees, 80 rupees, so on, and decide accordingly. Unfortunately, in India today, we are not going by that rule. We are going by demand and supply for foreign currency. And there's a lot of fraudulent foreign currency conversions that are taking place. So this 80 is too high. In my opinion, if you went back to the economic consideration, the present dollar rupee rate should be 35 rupees to a dollar. But unfortunately, the system is refusing to get into that. They are still allowing people who bring in money and carry out an exchange. Sometimes they have participatory notes. I don't know whether you heard participatory notes as one of the most villainous things that has been invented. So there are ways and ways in which the people who can speculate on the rupee, they succeed, and that's why your rate is continuing to go up. I think we have to leave now. I have to, as I told you, you can call me again later on. I'm not asking for an invitation, but I'm suggesting one.
Thank you, sir. I now invite Mr. Harsh Vekaria to propose a formal vote of thanks for this session.
Thank you, MOC. Financial architecture places its focus on the collective governance arrangements for safeguarding the effective functioning of the global monetary and financial systems. Economic development is achieved with a foolproof architecture after taking care of all the contingencies that come along. I would like to extend my heartiest thanks to Sri Dr. Subramanian Swamy ji, which is an inspiration to all of us. Thank you, sir. We are greatly honored to have you in our National CA Students Conference. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, Harsh.
All are requested to please remain seated as we begin with the core technical session again after the day's changeover.